I'm on mute. Let's try that again. Yeah. Good day. Greetings. Sorry about that. Yeah. Yeah. I had it all worked out, and there I was on mute. Yeah. Need an indicator for the software when I'm on mute. Anyway, trench safety and trenches today, subject of the stream. And I hope you're bringing your questions into the chat or into the comments if you're viewing this later. Yeah, recent events have occurred and it prompted me to talk about this. But yeah, let's get started. Yeah, so, yeah, just as a mention, this is what occurred during the day on Thursday. I was teaching an auditing course. I was co-facilitating an auditing course, and there was a break in things, and I happened to take a look at my phone, and this propped up. This headline should not be popping up on anybody's phone, on any news, any social media, or for that matter, and simply not happening. And hence the reason we're talking about it today. Now, I followed the story throughout the day and thought, I need to talk about this. And honestly, when managing some civil projects, it's one thing that I ran into quite a bit. In fact, almost every single one. Now, thankfully, nothing happened in those situations, but more on that in a bit as we go on. Yeah, but maybe what we need to do is, let's just talk about the chat rules first off and foremost. And first off, welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining me and participating. And do me a favor, introduce yourselves in the chat. Like if you're shy and you want to hang about the wall, that's fine. It's good. It's your opportunity and it's your right. But participation and introductions are nice because my effort here and when I'm started these live streams is also to form a community. That was one of my goals in creating this channel. It certainly wasn't to get rich. It was to do a few things, develop my presentation skills, and create a safety community, and have that opportunity to reach out and talk to people and communicate all over the world. So your participation, your introductions I'm grateful for them, and I'd like to get to know you better. Now, the other thing is, please ask and answer. I don't mind dialogue going on. It's not all about me. It's actually about you. So if a question comes up, feel free to weigh in. Your knowledge and your opinions count. Because the other thing that I found in discovering this is I know in Canada, safety differs a lot from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But the other thing to consider as well is that it differs lots from country to country and different jurisdictions within those countries. And so I appreciate hearing from all of you. Now, but on that note, do me a favor, be civil. No name calling, no insults, no attacks. Just let's be collaborative and collegial, okay? And then finally, the other thing, it's funny, I, excuse me, have to say it, but I shouldn't have to say it. And that is that this is not professional advice. This is us all getting together, collaborating, talking, and sharing experiences. And hopefully, if anything, we can walk away a little bit enriched in our knowledge. So it's not professional advice. There's no money changing hands, no contracts being signed. So please don't equate it as that. Don't go away and do something and say, well, Kevin said, because I've heard that quite a bit before. But yeah, so let's just dive in and yeah, talk more about this. Now, first off and foremost, maybe what I need to do is bring up the following bit for that headline, and it's unfortunate, and I apologize for this. It's sad. Excuse me. Here's the headline. Man 27 dead after trench collapse in the Northwest. Yes, I talked about there was that trench collapse, but now we find out he's dead. Crews worked for hours to expose the trench. We'll talk a bit more about the dangers and what happens in a sec, but Calgary Fire Department says a man has died after he was buried in a collapsed trench while doing sewer repairs. And it goes on to talk about, and if anybody wants the link, I can post it in the chat, or I can post it into the description afterwards. Just let me know, and I'll pop the link in. This is compliments of CBC, as you saw at the top of the headline. Now, part of the delay when they're doing these rescues is, of course, that crews have to take extensive safety precautions because it's an unsafe trench at this time. And that's partially why they're doing this, is because it was unsafe and it collapsed. So, going further, Calgary Fire Department media release said he had gone down the ladder into the hole which had been dug the day before, and a large amount of earth collapsed on top of him from the steep slope above. Stay tuned. We'll talk more about that in a second. Crews were at the scene for most of the day, and of course it's a rescue, then it's a recovery. Now, here's the thing. A man was working on a ladder in a 3 to 6 meter deep trench when it caved in. Now, depending on your age and where you are, that's anywhere from 10 feet to 20 feet deep. And we'll talk more about the depth and so forth in just a second. So let's come back to everything. There we go. And like anything else, if you have questions, post them into the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them. But when we're getting right down to it, there's a few more things to consider here. So let's dive in and have a look at the anatomy of a trench, if you will. So you see here that we have actual parts to a trench. And so you have the lip, which is the edge of the trench. Then you'll have what's called the belly, which some people may refer to as the sides of the trench, the toe, the very bottom of the curve, and then, of course, the floor of the trench. And then above, where they put the material that they've dug out of the trench, becomes the spoil pile. Now, a few of the things that you see here, I want you to picture also, too, the, how should we say, the instability. I want you to picture erecting a wall, just a wall, with nothing on either side of the wall to hold it up. Now, how stable is that wall? Even retaining walls that you see, excuse me, will have braces either underneath the ground or internally that you don't see, but there is bracing. Here what we've got is regular earth. And that's it. When you're doing an excavation, you have regular earth. So therein lies part of the problem. Now, the other thing is, a lot of times, what happens is there'll be an excavation and then it's left overnight. And whether it's raining, drying, whatever the case may be, those walls can become even more unstable. Now, the other piece is, and you see in the diagram with the arrow pointing spoil pile, the excavated material is often just put on the edge of the trench, which adds to the instability. Now, the other thing is, if that trench is, say, only 2 meters deep, but that spoil pile is another 2 meters high, that trench is essentially 4 meters deep because the spoil pile adds to it. The other thing is the spoil pile is not packed or anything else. What happens is that the spoil pile is also unstable earth, and the weight of it adds to the instability of the belly of the trench. So basically, you have an unstable trench. Now, part of the problem, we'll talk about stability in trenches in a sec, but part of the problem is when you're selecting your contractors, and this was a private contractor, it wasn't the city employee. Now, how should I put this? The best way to put this is that I am not in the business of trying anybody in the public eye, and this is not the court of public opinion. So there's going to be an extensive investigation done by multiple parties, and eventually the conclusions will be drawn and we'll find out about it in the press. And I promise you I'll try to follow up with it once we get news. Now, one of the issues here is of course when you're having contractors doing the work. It's like anything else. I did a recent live stream regarding contractors just recently, and I'll be using some of that material. So maybe let's start talking about it now. Part of the issue is contractor selection. When you're selecting contractors, it's got to start with the request for proposal. And regardless, usually government entities, whether they be municipalities, provincial or state or federal, whatever the case may be, usually there's a requirement to maintain integrity. And I know it doesn't happen often. Here in Canada, we're much like a banana republic that way. And we see it happen quite a bit. But usually there's an RFP and there should be selection criteria within it. And ideally, one of the things is you should have your safety professional, or you guys as safety professionals should be invited to vet the RFP and have a look at it first. One of the biggest mistakes, and I talked about this recently, is just boilerplating RFPs from one to another. It needs to be personalized. It needs to be within the scope of the expected work. And for example, it might be that you're doing an RFP for high-risk work. And this should be the case that the RFP needs to outline from the perspective of the contractor and the prospective contractor how they're going to perform the work, especially high-risk work like entering an excavation. Now, the other notion is you can use that RFP to develop a preferred contractors list, a list of contractors that you know will use the necessary controls when completing those different contract assignments. And now, beyond that, I also talked about culling criteria. And this is an obvious case. So you're going to hire folks. Have those folks made the news over negligence? And the example I used is like having Dexter for a roommate. You want to watch yourself here. And so do your research when hiring a contractor. And I would hope that large municipalities would do the same thing. And see if there's been recent penalties, recent warnings, etc. And also the other thing is part of your RFP in that culling criteria will ask for previous experience and examples of previous work of similar scope being completed and the outcomes. So coming in under budget, coming in with no injuries, hopefully no fatalities, etc., and no written orders and all of that. And so those things should be submitted as part of the proposal. So realistically, part of the problem is hey, we want to hire a contractor, go get a list of contractors. And then somebody goes and turns to Google and brings down a list of contractors. Now, the other thing is what is their safety program like? In this case, you might want to examine their safety management system and see if they have things like excavation procedures, processes for entering excavations, etc., and the safe work procedures in place, and including monitoring of any subcontractors they may hire. A lot of times what happens is people will say, oh, they're core certified, or they have this type of certification, and then Bob's your uncle. That's all that's needed. And realistically, it has to be more than that. You have to get down to the nitty gritty. And that's part of the process. And it should be considered part of the administrative control process for this happening. No matter what, you vicariously transfer some risk when you hire contractors, but not all of it. If you notice that article, and like I said, if you want to know the article, just let me know in the chat or comments and I'll post it into the description. Maybe I'll just do it afterwards if I can remember. But you don't see the name of the contractor. You don't see the name of the company reported. But what you do see is the city of Calgary. And so I want you to picture if it's a larger organization that you work for, not necessarily a municipality. Maybe it's a large organization, they're hiring another contractor. And so realistically, who's going to end up in the news? The biggest name is going to end up in the news. Maybe not immediately, but later on. But you may see photos taken of the equipment, and there'll be stickers and logos, etc., on the equipment. So just keep that in mind. The other thing, of course, is having those typical risk measures in place, and that's like commercial general liability insurance, professional liability insurance, E&O insurance, errors and omissions insurance, but also clearance letters and special certifications, licenses, etc. Now, when it comes down to entering an excavation, we're going to talk about the controls in a second. Is there a professional engineer on site and being part of that whole process, especially deep in excavations? So now the next thing, of course, is let's talk about monitoring. When you're engaging a contractor to perform the duties and the tasks at the work site, it shouldn't be set it and forget it. It's just, oh yeah, here's the place you're going to go. Go ahead, go dig. Go knock down trees, go knock down houses, go do whatever you're going to do. There should be some monitoring. I mean, it's very few people that'll go and hand the keys to your house to a contractor, so without doing some sort of a monitoring and checking. I know we see it all the time on the TV shows, but realistically, myself, I'd want to be monitoring and checking on them. So, there needs to be some sort of monitoring. So what are you going to do? Well, first off, you as the safety person or the manager monitoring the project, whatever the case may be, are you attending the tailgates? You as a safety professional should be part of those tailgate and kickoff meetings. You should be. This way you get to hear firsthand the plan of the going of the project, and you should stay there for the initial first scoopful of dirt to be taken out, etc. You'll also get to hear the intimate details and the input from the workers involved, and maybe offer some of yours. And then the next thing, of course, is making site observations. How long is the job? And is there a possibility that you can group some similar jobs together and be touring through and around those jobs during the day? And so I'm wondering, where was the observation? Like, I got a lot of questions. I'm sure the public has a lot of questions. Once again, this is not trial through public opinion. This is just asking questions. And so what about site observations? Who is doing it? And when you're making those site observations, you get to have a chance to look at the controls being used. He was on a ladder, and you can't just necessarily jump down into an excavation. Sometimes they're deep enough, and when you get a certain age, you can't jump that high anyway because you're going to hurt something. And ladders have to be there. There has to be a means to an escape. But once again, the problem boils down to this. What was happening? Why was the person on the ladder? Were they trying to get out? Were they overcome, etc.? And we'll find all that out as we move along. But what were the controls? And I promise you we'll talk about the controls in a second. Well, maybe a minute or two. Now, the next thing is, what about reviewing ongoing documentation? Was there a site-specific hazard assessment done? Were there formal hazard assessments completed prior to? See, the thing is, with worker involvement with both the site-specific hazard assessment, it being talked about at the kickoff and tailgate meeting, then the work process is outlined, the ways to control things are outlined. And in the absence of controls, we have dangerous work. And if that's brought up, workers have that right to refuse dangerous work. And this is a case where, realistically, no matter what, reasons Swiss cheese theory comes through. And yes, there is a possibility that there were controls in place, but something got through and missed. And so be it. But no matter what kind of controls were in place and what kind of monitoring was taking place, like I said, we got questions. People have questions. So let's talk about the controls that you might see. And the main one with entering an excavation is whalers, and that's WALERS. And that's that sheet that you see being put down. And the idea of whaling is there's barriers put right against the side walls of the trench, the belly of the trench, and it is controlling that dirt moving in. And then there's cross bracing put up. So you see here a broken sewer pipe, and the trench has been well excavated for the repair. We have bracing, we have cross bracing, side bracing, and we have whaler panels being put in, or shoring panels being put in. There's all sorts of different things. There's clamshell boxes. I could go through this, and I urge you to look up. And if you want to follow up live stream to this, just talking more about trenching controls, by all means, let me know in the comments of the chat and I can work on it. But here's the controls. Now, beyond that, if someone's entering a trench without those controls in place, usually there has to be some sort of clearance by a professional engineer. And there's compaction testing of the ground and walls, the belly of the trench, to make sure that it's possible. In most cases, you shouldn't be entering a trench without some sort of protection. Now, beyond that, if you notice in this photo, do you see the spoil piles? Do you see them anywhere? They should be well beyond the lip of the trench. They have to be back far enough from the trench where they're not going to put any force on the belly or the walls of the trench and have the risk of starting to slough and cause an avalanche into the trench. It's just called sloughing. We don't necessarily call it an avalanche, but I thought I'd use plain language. And so that has to be noted here as well. So lots of questions. So you as an incident investigator, when you're investigating an excavation cave-in, and I'm hoping that it's a near miss. That's the ones I've done, a close call or near miss, where the dirt has sloughed in and somebody's reported it. So you've been, and the reports I've had is, hey, I made it out in time, but this happened. Really. And I'll just as a sidebar here for a sec, talk about an issue a colleague told me about. And she works for, I won't bother saying because, I might get them in trouble. But she shared this with me. And this was a case where she and another colleague, or another part of her team, were inspecting some residential construction. And they happened to look about a city block away, and there was another excavation being done. And she said she was positive she saw a colored hard hat popping up around there. So they went over and had a look. And sure enough, there was a person in the trench. And the person was a co-op high school student on work experience. Keep that in mind. Who didn't know any different. And this actually made the local news as well. And she said, come out of there, you. And so he climbed up the ladder. And just as he got out of there, the place where he was caved in. And so there was written orders that came from it and so forth. And so there's got to be some understanding here. First off, number one, being in the news is not a good thing. And here's a little piece of trivia for you. In Canada, for sure anyway, and it might be the same in your jurisdictions. Let me know in the comments or the chat. But the highest or the biggest demographic of injured workers in Canada is males under the age of 25. Part of the reason is they often will take too many chances. They are supermen until they hit 25. I know I was. And I've got a lot of long-term injuries to justify that thought. Yeah, hence my wording. And so, once again, this young man fell under that demographic. And just think about it. In the prime of his life, beginning his life, and he would not have been able to outrun that dirt. It fell just like that. It collapsed. The debris came down just like that. Now, the other thing to think about is just this. When that happens, when this occurs, and the dirt ends up in your diaphragm, you've lost the ability to breathe because you've got that weight against your diaphragm. It's called no room for life. And so had he been down there and that dirt had come in, even if his top part had been out, his from the chest down had been out, he still likely would have died. Okay? Because you cannot get that dirt out quick enough and you cannot excavate him quick enough. You have to remember, you stop breathing, lose that inability to breathe, 4 to 6 minutes, cell death starts to occur, and it starts occurring and it gets rapidly worse as it moves on. So no matter what, I want to say this the best way possible. Young people out there, you're not Superman, okay? Don't take stupid chances. So that's that. And this brings me to the next piece. Does anybody, I don't see any questions. I don't see anything entered into the chat. Everybody's being quiet. So, not a problem. Hi to all of you. I see that there's people viewing, so hi to all of you. There have been some questions come across in the me. And so here's one of them. How long should an incident investigation last? And hey, you know what? Excellent question. The quick answer is until it's done. But you have to realize that there's some extenuating circumstances that do occur. A big one is, of course, are you awaiting lab results? Are you awaiting test results? Are you awaiting a final report from subject matter experts such as engineers, industrial hygienists, professional hygienists, etc.? And that can make investigations go on for a long time. I can remember I did one and I had 3 different subject matter experts. I had an industrial hygienist, a health impact expert, and of course, a biologist, all had to give me reports. And so my investigation took a couple of extra weeks to get this material back and then compile it into the report. So an investigation should last until it's done and you've reviewed all of the data, formed conclusions, and prepared some suggested corrective actions, and you've put it all together for your presentation. Keeping in mind, you're always going to get pressure from, is it done, is it done, is it done, from executives, C-suite folks, etc. And realistically, don't cave to the pressure. Just make sure as soon as I have something concrete to inform you, I'll give you updates. Until then, nothing's changed. Stand your ground, because the worst thing you want to do is give them incorrect or preliminary information that you can't necessarily verify. It ruins your credibility and it's going to harm your safety culture. So avoid that. Okay. Now, the next one I had is, how often do we need to inspect the work site? And it's a good question. First off, number one, what are your jurisdictional requirements? In Alberta here, for instance, we're kind of cowboy, but realistically, also not. It should be based on the cumulative hazards that you have with the tasks that are present with the tasks being performed at the work site. And so if you have things like, say, excavations being done at your work site, you want to be inspecting that frequently because hazards can develop. There should be ongoing inspections when there's high hazard work being done. But let's say that you're working at a manufacturing plant, you have a certain amount of administrative personnel, you have a certain amount of stock and inventory personnel, and you have a certain amount of folks that are doing the actual manufacturing. You could split that up, and the admin office area gets inspected maybe once a month, once a quarter, depending how often new hazards emerge. So you should be reviewing and studying that. The warehouse personnel might be a bit more often, maybe once a month. Same with the manufacturing personnel. Once again, though, inspection should also be occurring after an incident takes place to confirm that corrective actions are being performed, done, and they're working. Okay? It's not a matter of, oh, done a corrective action, my job's done, pat myself on the back, move on. And that's not the case. Okay? So, yeah. And there we go. That's the questions I've received thus far. And so it's a shorter live stream today. Only a half hour, but still just the same. That's about all I had. And so if there's no questions entering in the chats, if anybody else has any questions, nobody has introduced themselves. Who's here, by the way? Is it Dave? Are you here? Kelly? Some of the regular folks? Yeah. Um, yeah, so I thank you so much for joining me. I thank you for coming to the live stream. And I just want to urge you, no matter who you are, where you are, what you do, what your job is if you're going to talk the talk, walk the walk, lead by example. You don't have to be a CEO, part of the executive, a manager, a supervisor, a team lead, anything like that. You can be a safety leader simply by leading by example, saying the right things at the right time, doing the right things at the proper time, and being in the right place at the right time so others can see that example. You can be a safety influencer. You can provoke safety. Yeah. So thank you very much for all that have joined us. Anybody, I'll just leave it out there. Has anybody got any other final questions or anything that you want to bring up? And if not, I will wish you an excellent weekend. Enjoy it. And if you've got something else that you want to see in a live stream, Kelly's given me one regarding questions for a survey. So I am working on that. But like anything else, there's things that take time. Yeah, and if you've got things you'd like to see in videos, once again, let me know. Morale Inside brings me lots of ideas all the time, so I appreciate those as well. So anyway, there's that. I'll just bring the music up, and yeah, take care, and have a great weekend, and I'll see you again next time. Okay, bye for now.